Welcome to the Spheres of Spirit with Nancy Myers, aka the Lady of the Light. Nancy will discuss the everyday magic and wisdom of spirit which surrounds each of us, waiting to be discovered. She will share some of her remarkable orb photos, proving that our angels, guides, loved ones in spirit, and even pets surround us and guide us in our physical world. During this episode, Nancy will discuss one of the many spheres or aspects of spirit available to us based on her orb photography. She will also share a special channeled message from her guide, Leonini, and do an oracle card reading to help guide you along your personal spiritual adventure. And now, here is your host, orb photographer, author, medium, and speaker, Nancy Myers.
Hi, welcome to the show. Thanks for spending some time with us today. I am joined by numerologist Michaele Wynn-Jones. Hi, Michaele.
Hi, Nancy. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Michaele joins us today all the way from across the pond in England. So I thank her very much. She's up a little bit later to join me today. I'm really excited to have Michaele on the show, you guys. You are in for a treat. Her knowledge of numerology is unbelievable. I always tell my audience, Michaele, that I speak from experience. I share my experiences. That's all I can do. I'm not an expert on anybody, but I share what's happened to me. I had a reading with Michaele last week, and it was absolutely remarkable what she gets from numbers and how she reads them. And I thought, oh my goodness, she has to come on my show and share this with you all. And she has graciously agreed. So here she is. So in 2004, Michaele achieved her Numerology Diploma from the, and I don't know how to say this name of the school. Is it Connaissance?
Connaissance School.
Connaissance School of Numerology. But what Michaele does is she also links numbers and colors. She's linking numbers to both colors and archetypes to these numbers, which makes her readings very, very unique. Did I share that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. What's even worse is I can't add up and get the same answer twice.
Hey, my motto is math sucks, so I'm right there with you. So now let's start a little bit who you are, how you got started in this, and because this is a fascinating story. And the reason I want to share this is because, audience, we never know the direction that spirit's going to take us. And when things start happening and we're open to them, I think that's when we discover who we are, our life purpose, and really what we are meant to do. So, Michaele, can you share some of that?
Yes. I started off as a teacher, and I was deputy head of a mainstream primary school in England. And on my 40th birthday, my life totally imploded because my husband went off with the office floozy. And I was left with two very young children. And what happened was 3 days after my husband left, I stopped being able to walk. I literally couldn't put my weight on my left leg at all because I was left without a leg to stand on and no means of support, literally.
Wow.
And I had to have a knee replacement, and I'm much too young for a knee replacement. But they did a knee replacement operation, which meant I was off work for 14 months, and the education board ditched me on the grounds of ill health. And I needed a job. I had a new mortgage and two little kids, no income from my husband, and I had to get a job. And the only job that was offered to me was 3 days in a men's remand prison, teaching in the art room, because they told me that if I did that, they would get me qualifications or references so that I could get a job in a college teaching adults. I didn't have any experience teaching adults. So I went to prison, and I went to prison for 3 days. I hated it, hated every single minute of it. And I also noticed that I was being stalked by a number. And I don't do numbers, Nancy. I'm dyscalculiate. I literally cannot remember my own telephone number if I'm tired. And I was being stalked by number 16. I didn't know what it meant. But I'm a skeptic. So I started writing it down in a notebook to see if I was orchestrating them in some way.
So let me stop you right. When you say you're being stalked by the number 16. Is it because you kept seeing it, hearing
Yeah.
it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was like Harry Potter. It was like that Harry Potter moment when all the letters come down the chimney. 16 was in my face, sometimes 4 times a day.
Wow.
And so I started logging them in a notebook. And when I had filled the notebook, it occurred to me to go on the internet and see whether 16 meant something rather than just being a number. And I landed on a tarot website. I don't do tarot. And it said that getting 16 was worse than getting the death card because it meant sudden catastrophic loss and loss of reputation.
Wow.
And that's what prison's about. And the moment I realized that that's what prison is about for all the inmates, sudden catastrophic loss and loss of reputation, then I started to notice something else rather weird about numbers. Because all over the world, when people go to prison for the first time, they're given a number. It's a way of dehumanizing people. Mm-hmm. So you might be, instead of being Nancy, you might be AW1476. And I started to notice that men who had committed very violent crime, like murder, rape, assault, armed robbery, they had lots of number 8s in the prison serial numbers. Men who persuaded children to get in the car or persuaded old ladies to give up their pension, they had lots of number 3. And I thought the government had got a code. So I rang them up. And I said, I'm a loudmouth woman. I put my mouth in gear before I put my brain in gear, and men throw tables at me. I need the code list. And they said, it's random.
So there was no secret code that they were identifying the prisoner.
No, it was totally random. So I went back on the internet and I said, does number 8 and does number 3 mean something? And this time I landed on a numerology website that said number 8 was all to do with issues of control. And that made sense to me in terms of murder and rape and assault.
For sure.
And number 3, that was called the actor. And that made sense to me in terms of men who persuade children to get in the car or take old money off old ladies.
Wow.
So I got hooked on it.
Wow. What made you notice the numbers to begin with? Do you know?
No, I don't, because I don't do numbers.
Yeah.
I really hate numbers. I don't do them. There was an incident in the prison. I don't think I mentioned this to you. There was an incident in the prison with a young man who was a lifer, and he wanted to learn psychology, and the prison would not let me teach him psychology because they didn't want a prisoner having skills he could use against a prison officer.
Oh.
So I said to this young man, well, I'll bring you something interesting. And he said, such as what? I said, I don't know. And I took him James Redfield's Celestine Prophecy.
Ah, I am very familiar with that.
I took that. I took another book called Living the Life You Love. I took that. Oh, and I took something by some bloke called Dan Millman. I'd never heard of Dan Millman, but it was an interesting book and it was all about numerology and I had no idea what it meant. So I took him that because this young man was a keep fit fanatic. So I thought he'd like it. And I remember being in the classroom and I had 16 men and this one young guy. And I said to this young guy, when's your birthday? He told me. And I found the relevant chapter in this book by Dan Millman. And I gave it to the young man. And I then turned my attention to the other 16 lads to teach them how to write formal letters. And the young man with a book lay on the floor in the classroom, weeping out of every orifice. He was in the fetal position. And then he said to me, how did you know? And I said, how did I know what? He said, how did you know about me, Michelle? It's not in my records.
Wow.
And then he told me his story. And his story was echoed by some of the weird number stuff that was in his book.
It described him perfectly.
Yes. And then he said to me, you get on with the numbers. And I said, but I don't do numbers, Lenny. And he said, we have a contract. Get on with the numbers.
Wow.
So I taught myself to do numerology, and I did it for 8 years in prison with the men. I was so horrified by the number of suicides that happen in prison, Nancy. And I was hating the way prison officers regarded suicides. The Home Office the justice system didn't seem to care. And I did, because sometimes it was a man I'd been teaching in the morning who'd killed himself by 4:30, and I never saw it coming.
Wow.
And I found it really difficult. And so I thought I could use the numbers as a way of showing the men that they had some kind of potential, and that suicide and being a criminal were not the only potentials they had. And the numbers seemed to do that.
That was just my next question was, how do you define numerology and its purpose? So you saw it work from the very beginning.
Yes, right from the very beginning. For me, right at the very beginning, I was just trying to say to the men, you're not here by accident. You might be in prison by accident, but you're not here by accident. And you're not the worthless person you think you are. You've got a skills bank, and you've got gifts, and you've got talents. And I think we might be able to work out how that works. But I can't add up, Nancy. So there are systems of numerology I couldn't use because the numbers run into thousands. And I need numbers that only went up to 10. So I could count them on my fingers and not have to take off my shoes and socks to count up to 20.
Yeah.
And that's when I decided to color the numbers.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So that is very unique what you do. I don't know of another numerologist that incorporates colors with the readings.
I don't either.
No. And so this just came to you again. You've got to have been guided because you were meant to do this.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. Prior to going into prison, I was one of the first people in the UK to take on that Colour Me Beautiful stuff, because I'd gone for interviews and been turned down because I looked ill. And so I discovered Colour Me Beautiful, which meant you wear certain colours to enhance the way you look. And so I was already involved with how colours have an influence on people's lives and buildings. In fact, at one point I coloured the prison. I coloured A Wing to stop riots. But so I knew a lot about colour, and I was working in the art room, and I don't like numbers. They give me the heebie-jeebies. So I thought, if I'm going to work with them, I've got to make them user-friendly. And so I decided to colour them. And it was only about 8 years later that I discovered that the colours had a relationship with the chakra system.
Wow.
But I didn't know that when I started. I had no idea.
That's when you know you're divinely guided.
I agree with you. I agree. Not only that, I was only in prison for 3 days originally, and I stayed 10 years.
Did you?
Yeah.
Wow. So it must have been rewarding, and you must have felt like you were making a difference.
I could teach the men to read.
Wow.
And that was the big thing. 60% of the men in my prison had a reading age of 7, which meant they couldn't even get a job. Some of them had never been to school. I had a brilliant book, Nancy. I don't know if I should say this on air, but I found a book on eBay called Sex Tips for Boys.
Oh, that'll keep their interest.
They all wanted to learn to read. I had no problem. 5 weeks, they were all reading.
That's hilarious. Okay, so that's how you got into numbers.
Yes.
So I'd like to know your opinion on the history of numbers, or what numbers are, where they came from.
Okay, my current belief, unless I'm proven wrong, is that numbers were not actually originally on this planet. I believe they were downloaded. I believe they came to the Chaldeans, the Sumerians, and the Babylonians, and it was given to them. It was the very first science that ever existed. This is not New Age. This is not New Age. In fact, I think I'm correct in saying that the kind of numerology that the Chaldeans do is still taught in mystery schools amongst people like the Jewish community.
Oh.
It's secret knowledge. So the numbers have been, to a certain extent, secret knowledge.
So I'm going to go off to the side here for just a little bit. During my reading that you did for me, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but you referred to, I think you said, your line manager.
Yeah. I have a slight technical hitch, as I don't really have a proper religion. And so I refer to my line manager, Pythagoras. My father was Russian, and my father used to ask me when on earth I was going to study Pythagoras. I never knew what Pythagoras was, But of course, it was his way of saying Pythagoras.
Oh, interesting.
So my line manager is Pythagoras because Pythagoras taught numerology.
Wow.
And my current belief is it is possible that's where I first learned to do numerology, in one of the mystery schools with Pythagoras, because the other systems are highly complex. If I do get a Jewish client, I am prepared to work with the Chaldean system for them, but I do have to use a calculator because the numbers run into thousands.
Wow.
Can't do it on the back of an envelope,
Right.
which is what I'm quite comfortable doing it on the back of a serviette even.
Wow. Well, along that, Chris, if we can bring up that first slide, I want to share with my audience. So here's a quote from Pythagoras, and it says, "Number, singular, by the way, rules the universe." And this is an orb that I took a while back, and I'm going to go to I could see a face in this. I knew it was an ancient teacher, but I couldn't figure out who it was until I talked to you. And then I went back and I couldn't figure out why. There's always got to be a reason why I capture these people in the orbs that I do. So, Chris, if we can bring up the second slide. And the picture on on the left side there is the actual orb, and perhaps you can see the face. If you look for the beard on the very bottom, you can see the white nose,
Yes.
even the little hat. Now, in the center picture is a picture of a statue of Pythagoras. And then the other one I outlined kind of, I'm not a graphic artist by any stretch, his face, just so you could kind of orient your eyes. But I captured this a while ago, and I knew there was a reason, so I saved it. And after I talked to you, I went, the OMG, that's why I captured this. So he is probably, because now, I've talked to you, he probably came in to show that, he's maybe a guide, right, to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I just wanted to share that because I found that just fascinating. I hope my audience can see that. Thank you, Chris, so much for that.
Well, I find that boggling.
Yeah, that's, I'll just share this little bit about my reading with Michelle, because she had never met me. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know what I do. And she told me something, and I'll paraphrase, "You're here to do something unique." And, you're not going to do it like everybody else. And what I do with the orbs, with the faces, there's not a lot of orb photographers that do that. And I went, oh my gosh, you're spot on. But you saw that in the numbers, which to me is fascinating.
To be honest, that's one of the reasons why I use a dictaphone, because I am a skeptic and I don't want my brain getting in the way when I am getting information. Because sometimes, Nancy, I get information that is so out of left field, I have no idea where it could possibly come from if it wasn't coming from outside myself.
Yeah, you're channeling it,
yes,
right?
Yes. I've spent years denying it. But that's the reality. The reality is I get information. It drops into my head and out of my mouth.
Yeah, you must be an 11 also.
I've got 11s in secret places. I do, yeah.
Yep, you taught me that. Yeah. So I loved that when during the reading you referred to God, source, whatever you want to, joy, however you want to, as mission control.
I call it mission control, yeah.
And I noticed that during your reading, my reading, you would be talking to somebody off camera. And you go, yes, I've got it. Yes, I'll share that with her. Yes, thank you. So there you do work with someone that's helping you.
I tried to deny it, but there's not much point.
No, there isn't. And I'm sure because you are so meant to do this, you're so good at it, that you have a lot of help from the other side.
I'm sure I have a lot of help.
Yeah.
Because as I said, I get information out of left field. I told one lady who was an artist that she was supposed to be doing phytobiochemistry. And she said, "What is it?" I said, "I've got no idea. I can't even spell it."
Yeah. So that's when you know it comes
Yeah.
to you and not from you, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're not familiar with the words. So I'm going to ask you one question because, first of all, I'm not sure which question to, which one do you want me to ask first? Okay. So the numbers that you have that you get, and we're going to talk about how she gets the numbers in a minute, but they're all assigned meaning or traits. Do you know where that came from? Who assigned the numbers meanings?
I can only imagine that that's come from Pythagoras.
Okay.
I don't know where it came from. When I went to the Connaissance School of Numerology, the only reason I went there is I don't even have basic math skills. And my local chamber of commerce, the business community, were going to buy a building and asked me which building they should buy. And I thought, if they look me up, I haven't got any maths qualifications. So how do I do this stuff? So I went to Connaissance to train in what they call esoteric numerology.
Oh.
The problem with it is, what the hell does it mean? It was, I couldn't ever use it. I could never use it because my clients would never have understood it. I was working in a prison with men with very little education. They wouldn't have understood the first sentence, and it wasn't relevant to their lives at all. So although I got the piece of paper so that I got the piece of paper, I have never in my life used esoteric numerology. I have used street level numerology.
I would argue the point that it's not street level. I would say it's a little higher than street level.
But I don't talk astro speak. That's what I mean. People can understand exactly what I say.
Yeah. Okay, so when you do a reading, you asked me for two things. You asked me for my name, my married name, and my date of birth.
That's right.
So starting with my name, when you look at it, you assigned a number to each letter, I believe.
I do, yes.
I was going to show my chart, but I don't want to share that. So, were you taught which number goes with which letter? Is that the basis of numerology?
Yes, that is the basis. Now, the problem is, if you're doing Jewish or Chaldean numerology, the numbers and the letters are not the same as Pythagoras. Some languages have more letters and more numbers, and they have letters that are not in the Western alphabet. So, for example, if I'm doing a Russian client, I ask the Russian client to write me the Russian alphabet so I can put numbers on top of it, and then to tell me where the vowels are, because I believe they have more vowels than in the Western ordinary one, the English one. So not all alphabets are the same.
And do vowels carry a different meaning than the consonants?
They do. They absolutely do. Now, as far as I understand it, currently, when the numbers were downloaded to the Chaldeans, the Sumerians, and the Babylonians, they believed that their gods were so sacred that their names could not be spoken out loud by a human being. Some of my clients who are Jewish or Arabic tell me it's the same in their language. There are certain sounds that you can read, but you do not speak them because they're sacred. And they tend to be the vowels. So it's A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes W, and sometimes Y, depending on where they are in the name. And so those are sacred. And I believe that is your soul's contract, what your spirit or your soul wants to do in this incarnation. The other letters, the consonants of your name, that is what your persona wants to do. And they're not the same thing, because I believe that your personality changes every lifetime. Your soul does not change. Your soul goes on and on ad infinitum. It simply dresses itself in different costumes to have different spiritual experiences.
Right. And we're going to talk more about that on the backside after the break. But it was amazing that you just said about the AEIOU. There's an ancient text, and I I think it's the Sophia Pistis texts, and it talks about when Jesus taught his disciples how to raise their vibration and to reach him. He taught them this chant. It's A-E-I-O-U, but he calls it A-E-O-E-Ah. And there's a chant that you say to do that.
Crumbs.
Yeah. And it's all the vowels. It's in the other room. I'd read it, and sometimes before I meditate, I say that chant. Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating, Nancy, because as I said, I don't have a religious background, so I don't know stuff.
That's really amazing. Okay. So I have this quote by Pythagoras, because I think this describes you. And maybe you've heard this quote, maybe not, but I saw this and I went, I have to share this. So it says, when you have mastered numbers, you will in fact no longer be reading numbers any more than you read words when reading books. You will be reading meanings.
I think that's absolutely spot on.
Yeah, and that's Pythagoras.
That's absolutely spot on. I agree 100%.
And I think that's what you do. You've gone beyond just acknowledging each number. You read their meanings now.
Yes.
And wow.
Yes.
Okay, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about life planning, life review, and some of the stuff in between. We'll be right back.
OMTimes TV. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. OMTimes Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, OMTimes offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an OMTimes magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on OMTimes TV and broadcasting it across the extensive OMTimes radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. OMTimes. Open yourself to the possibilities. The story told in Entering the Light Fantastic, Discovering Life After Life Through Orbs, is about Nancy Meyer's spiritual and emotional rising from the devastating ashes of loss caused by the sudden and unexpected passing of her son Robbie. Just like the legend of the reborn phoenix, Nancy's life purpose and focus was transformed. With the help from her son in spirit, Nancy found herself providing proof through orbs that our souls do not die with our bodies. In her second book, Encircled by the Light Fantastic, A Deeper Journey into the Light with Orbs, Nancy continues chronicling her path of gaining spiritual knowledge and expanding acceptance of what is possible, while traveling to many sacred and ancient sites around the world. She shares these experiences with you along with her photographs of remarkable spirit encounters.
When I first saw a turtle, my heart was full. Now I'm anything but lonely.
We have this deep connection, this heart connection.
He just wants to be close to you and part of your life.
Every day with Turtle is a perfect day.
When I'm holding her, it makes me feel calmer.
I think everything he does shows how much he loves us.
When we adopt a shelter pet,
We discover
they're a little bit of a lot of things,
But they're all pure love.
love.
And we're back. Thanks for staying with us. So one of the things that is most important to you is our name. So when can you tell us the difference of our name that we come in with, and do we pick our name, and how important our name is to us?
Absolutely. I personally don't believe in fate. I don't think there is a St. Peter that tells us what we have to do, or somebody that tells us what we have to do, because this is the planet of free will. So strangely, I believe that we actually have a script writing meeting before we even get here. And I think we sit with our team, people with whom we've often or always incarnated, unless, of course, we get complacent when I think somebody else comes in to give us a kickstart. But I think that we choose what roles we want to play. So, for example, if you've always been very wealthy, it might be an opportunity for you to think, well, do you know what? I might want to experience a life when I'm a victim, in which case you could choose to be a Mexican trombone player who wants to be the president of America, or you could be a woman in Afghanistan. And what you need to do then is you need to recruit other people to take on different roles. So, for example, if you were going to be Cinderella, you're going to need a wicked stepmother, or it's not going to happen. And you're going to need a handsome prince and two horrible sisters. So I believe we choose what we want to do, and then we recruit people to take on the other roles, and it will all suit them. It will all work with what they want to do. And then I believe when we are in the womb, we tell our parents the names that we have as a shortlist, because I believe that our names contain the tools, the props, and the costumes that will enable us to live the life that we've designed. For example, if you're designing a life where you're going to be a leader, well, there's all kinds of leaders. Are you going to be a leader in the arts? Are you going to be in politics? How are you going to lead? I believe that is shown in your names, which is why twins are not the same, Nancy, because although twins have the same date of birth, their names are different.
Right.
The first name you have is the most important name you've got, because that's the name people use when they talk to you or when they talk about you.
Now, let me stop you right there. Is that one of the most important areas that you concentrate on? Is that how you, for your clients to read them, is their first name?
Well, strangely, a lot of my clients don't like their names.
Oh.
So one of the things I'm telling them is, but this is why you chose the name, because this is what skills, what talents this name has got in it that you actually need to make this life work.
Wow.
But I have actually read people who don't actually have a name. I've read Chinese clients who've been brought up by the church, shall I say, who are actually called Chinky. I've had a Chinky David and a Chinky Louise.
Wow.
I've even had a baby 13 because she was a failed abortion.
Oh, my goodness.
And I read that because that's what they've come in with. And then I say, and what name are you using now? So a change of name or a married name doesn't change who you are. It adds to your skills bank. It gives you more skills and more talents.
Wow. And all that, each of those names then is assigned a number. So each of those letters in those names. And because you pulled it together so amazingly. And I wanted to talk about, because we just mentioned, our married name. And you told me that there's something that a lot of people miss. And we know midlife crisis, but you talk about quarter life crisis.
Yeah. I had a young girl today. I was reading her today, a 16-year-old. She's not at that point yet, but she will be. Nobody talks about the quarter life crisis. Now, I believe that what happens when we're born is our soul has an agenda, and so does our personality. But our soul is not interested in sex or sleeping or eating or growing. So the human race would have died out on day 3. So the personality actually grows the human body. The personality is in charge. And in most people, the soul goes to sleep because it can't do anything. It's not going to be functioning. Once the human being is complete and they've grown into their matrix and they are who they're going to be, between the age of about 24 to 27 for women, sometimes a bit older for men, the soul wakes up and says, are you done growing? Because you know what? I have an agenda as well. And at that point, a third number comes in, which is a combination of the soul number and the persona number. And that is the number of the whole person. And that number then comes in. Now, what happens to somebody when they're going through their quarter life crisis is their soul has woken up. And their soul is saying to them, We need to work together. And so how do I mean crisis? Well, it could be that you leave university and you have to get a job. It could be that you get married very young. It could be you have your first child. It could be that you lose your first lover, or you buy your first house. Something happens to you that is meaningful, and no one ever talks about it. I keep thinking there's a book in it. I need to write the Millennials Guidebook.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So let's talk then about our numbers, which is our date of birth. Now, we give you the day, the month, and the year. So let's start with the day. And you say, when you look at that, you can tell what we brought to this life.
Yes. When I look at your day of birth, for me personally, your day of birth does not tell me who you were in a past life, because I'm not a past life regressionist. I actually have no interest in who you were. What I'm interested in is what experiences did you have? Because those experiences you've already had. So the moment the baby touches down, I know who's arrived. Now, the new agenda for this lifetime, for me, is the month of birth.
Okay.
I'm not an astrologer. The numbers are too high. I do not do astrology. My Asian numerologists are always astrologers, and they're nearly always priests. I don't have any of that background at all. So I'm always a bit surprised when I get Asian clients, because I have to point out, I'm not a man, I'm not a priest, and I can't do astrology.
But I bet you knock their socks off anyways.
I get a lot of them. Yeah, I do get a lot of them, because I speak in plain English as well, not all about nodes and all this stuff that you talk about with astrology. I talk plain English.
Yeah.
And so I look at your month of birth, which tells me what the main study is going to be for the whole of this lifetime, from the moment you get here till the moment you leave. Your month is the main area of study. Your year of birth does not just belong to you. Your year of birth belongs to everybody in your year group. And I call that the end of term project. And you start working on it probably from about the age of 48 onwards. But it is going to be an issue or a problem in your life, or you wouldn't care. And the idea of that number, I believe, is that every year group is going to be working on one aspect of human life to improve on it for everybody else on the planet. And I believe that every number is a multifaceted diamond. So you don't have to do the whole lot. You just have to do a little facet of that number in order to add to the whole, to benefit the whole. Then when I add the three numbers together, your day, your month, and your year, then I know why you're back, what it is you were planning to do.
So let's talk about some of those numbers and what they mean. Like if you're a 2 or a 5 or an 8, what, just touch on a few so we know what.
Okay. A number 1 is a person who, if they are a new soul, is going to come across as possibly a little bit aggressive, a little bit self-centered, possibly a little bit selfish, because it's all about number 1. The reality is what they are here to do is to be self-motivated, confident, independent, stand on their own 2 feet and start things. They are the starters of the world. Everything begins with number 1. And number 1s have issues. Everybody has issues. Every single number has positives and negative sides to it. Number 1 is supposed to be a leader in this lifetime. They're supposed to be somebody that generates new ideas.
Wow.
Number 2 doesn't want to be number 1. Number 2 is quite happy to be number 2. They want to help number 1. So they are people who will do the research, who will look at the small print, and who actually need to be part of a relationship. They don't do very well by themselves, because 2's company. They need a number 2. So they make brilliant personal assistants, for example. Nancy Reagan was a very good example of a cracking number 2, because she totally held that president. She was brilliant as a number 2. It's not easy finding famous number 2s.
Wow.
They don't want to be famous.
Yeah.
They're not interested in fame. They want to help number 1 be famous.
Sure.
Number 3s are people who are charismatic. They are great at telling stories. They are funny. They can be very critical. They are very clever. And it's the number of the child. It's the number of the artiste. I'm never sure how they're going to be the artiste. It depends on their names. But they're usually in full public view and they like people. Number 4, if you think about number 4, think about a block of concrete.
Oh my goodness.
Number 4s can be very stubborn. They are difficult to shift. They are the salt of the earth. They are a foundation of families. They very rarely max out their credit cards. They don't need to be rewarded. They just get on with the things that need to be done. They often have green fingers. So they grow things. They look after people. They are conservative with a small c, which you can't say about number 5s. Number 5s are out of the box. They will not be boxed in. They are the wild child. In fact, what a lot of people say about number 5 is it's all about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, which isn't really fair. It is people who think differently. They are catalysts for change. That's what they're meant to do. Number 6, that speaks for itself. If you can visualize number 6 in front of you, it's pregnant. So what's number 6 about? It's about family. Family, nurture, caring, looking after people, marriages, babies, all of that is number 6. Also, number 6 has a fat tummy. So number 6s are often professional chefs. They like feeding people. A lot of number 6s, especially if they're 3s and 6s, they're nearly always restaurateurs because they're hosting. They're looking after people, feeding people, mind host, 3s and 6s. Number 7s don't like people at all. Number 7s are introverts. Number 7s tend to put people underneath a microscope. They are quite often scientists, doctors, religious people, detectives, but they're not that comfortable with people. They prefer their own company. So they can be they come across as aloof and distant. The reality is they're actually quite shy and quite private people, number 7s. Number 8s run everything. Number 8s are the managers. They're the queen number. They're often in the forces. They're often in uniform jobs. They run everything. They run the country. They're always involved with money, handling money, and also they get bankrupted because they take risks with money. But for 8s, it's about money, power, wealth, status, and celebrity. Number 9, when they get that far, are fed up with all that money, power, wealth, and celebrity because they know you can't take it with you. What number 9s want to do is they want to make a difference in the world. When they die, they want to know, did I change somebody's life? Have I made a difference? So they're often visionaries, teachers, people who want to change other people's lives. I meet a lot of 9s who start charities and foundations because that's what they want to do. The danger of number 9s, if they've got too many of them, is they become a new age guru. And that is a problem. They begin to believe their own publicity and think they're better than God.
Oops.
Yeah, well, God then puts down a psychic banana skin and they lose it all.
Yeah,
they lose their reputation. They lose everything.
Yeah. Okay, you're not doing this.
No. And
You're
then
done.
there's another layer of numbers, which not everybody has. And they're called the master numbers. I did not name them. Pythagoras named them, as far as I'm aware. Number 11 is called the inspirer or the inspirational messenger because number 11 looks like a channel. It's open at the top and it's open at the bottom. Most of the world's most famous composers have had 11s because the music's come through them. Paul McCartney, Michael Jackson, they're all 11 and 4s and 22s, all about music. Number 22s are people who leave a legacy behind them. They're often in banking or finance. Our brand new king in England, he is an 1122, so is his mother. And so is the little prince, George. He's a 722. 22s leave a legacy behind them. Sometimes it's a physical thing, like a building, a reservoir, an institution, a way of doing things. In terms of medicine, they're people who have invented things like homeopathy, kinesiology, osteopathy. They tend to be 22s.
Wow.
It's to do with structure of the human body. And then we get 33, which is linked with Jesus Christ. So that is a number that is linked with the master teacher, master healer. Most numerologists don't think the other numbers are active. I personally believe they are wrong. In the last 18 months, I have met a couple of 44s who are active 44. I don't even know what it means, but I think it's the master therapist, because the people I've met are doing extraordinary things with therapies.
Wow.
But they're the master therapists. And then there are other numbers, 55, 66, 77, that I don't believe are active at the moment.
So these are different than what we hear as angel numbers, right? These are totally different.
My personal belief, and I'm going to get shot down in flames, I don't believe in angel numbers. I've had a big charity contact me because they want a name for their charity. They came up with the number 88 and then gave me a little lecture about what it means in angel numbers. And I let them lecture me. And then I said, do you really want to know what it means? And do you really want to know why you can't use it for your charity? And I told them.
Wow.
They can't use the number 88. And yet 8s are very much beloved by the Chinese because it's a symbol very similar to their symbol for wealth and abundance. But a 88, not so good, because there are numbers that represent dirty washing in your luggage. And a 88, number 16, is one of those numbers. It's karmic.
Wow. And you get all this from adding the numbers of our birth date, yes? Is that
your date of birth and the numbers in your names? I get all that information, yes.
So if you have a number that's a 2-digit number, then you add that together and then reduce it again. Right?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Pythagoras called that Fadic addition, F-A-D-I-C. He believed that every number could be reduced to a number between 0 and 9. Thank God, because I don't have to take the shoes and socks off in public. Even so, I sometimes add the numbers up wrongly when I'm tired. And if I'm doing this in public, Nancy, on a stage, which I quite often do, my first question isn't, is there a doctor in the house? It's, is there a tax accountant in the house? Is there somebody who can check the numbers, that I'm adding the numbers up correctly?
Yeah. Yeah. It's what, so you, I just, 0. You didn't talk about 0.
As far as I'm aware, and again, I currently believe that 0 is a magnifier. It takes you up to the next level. You're not a 2 anymore. You are a 20. So it is inviting you to use that mirror to look at every aspect of 2ness to see if you've covered it and then take it up a notch. For example, a person who is a number 2 is going to be loving, is going to check the small print, is going to weigh things up, and is peace loving. A 20 is likely to be a diplomat because they've taken that up and beyond to the next level.
Wow.
And a number 1, who is someone who starts something and generates something and is a leader, a number 10 is a leader amongst leaders.
Wow.
It's not so much about them. In England, our Prime Minister lives in 10 Downing Street, not 1 Downing Street.
Yeah.
Because they are a leader amongst other leaders.
Wow. When you start looking, the numbers and the meanings. So I'm sitting here listening to you go through all the different types of what's been assigned to the numbers. But I'm wondering from how much you got from your experience that you just cited to us, or was this something that was taught to you, or a little of both?
It's both. I had the most critical audience in the entire world to actually practice this on. I had 750 criminals, all men.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And I had to prove to those men that what I said to them was valid, that helped them understand their wives, that helped them understand their children, that helped them understand why they were in prison. And it had to make sense to them, because if it didn't, what was the point?
Right. So after you did that, then you felt like, you know what? I need a bigger audience or a different audience to do this work.
I didn't. I would only ever have done it in prison.
Really?
But I had to leave prison because I was making public statements on big stages about suicide, and the government tried to make me sign the Official Secrets Act.
Oh.
I'm one of the few people in England who can talk about prisons because the government forgot to get me to sign the Official Secrets Act, and I left before they could force it on me.
Wow. Well, there's got to be a reason for that,
Yeah.
right?
And then people started to say to me, what were you doing in prison? And I said, one of the things was I was looking at the numbers that the men carried as part of their persona.
Wow. Wow. I want to bring up the last slide, Chris, if I could. It's another Pythagoras. And I like this one because the way that the orbs have arranged themselves, it always looked like to me like our solar system. And Pythagoras said, God built the universe on numbers, and numbers are the universal language. And so that's how important it is. And so thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. So it's interesting that the person and your job to work with numbers, and you can't add as in your words, but yet what you do is remarkable. So there's so
Thank
many
you.
different ways to work with numbers. Now, I like I said, I had a reading with you, and it was phenomenal. I've listened to it 4 times because it's almost 2 hours long, audience.
Yeah.
It's remarkable reading. If people want to get a hold of you to schedule a reading, where do they go?
They can email me. That's the easiest and quickest way to do it. And my email is quite simple. My father was Russian, so my name is spelled incorrectly. It's Michael with an E on the end. And then it's D for Dennis, B for Bertie, I for India @gmail.com.
Okay.
Because I run a company called Diamond Bridge Initiative, and it's part of that company.
Okay. And we will put that when we post that
Thank
too.
you.
And then also, do you teach?
I do. I teach numerology. I'm a little bit careful where I teach it and who I teach it to, simply because in the past I've taught people who think they can do it in 5 minutes, and they're actually doing readings online very badly with my notes on their lap, telling everybody I've taught them.
Oh.
But recently I've been asked to teach mediums, because there are quite a few mediums who are getting numbers in their mediumship readings, and they don't know what the numbers mean. And so I got myself into a situation with a delightful man who spends a lot of time in America. And Brian said, you teach me the numbers and I will teach you mediumship.
Oh, there you go. So are your classes usually just one-on-one or group
No,
classes?
I teach groups. I'm due to go to Scotland, to Edinburgh, to teach a group there. There's usually about 20 of them.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I teach groups. When I teach in Holland, which I do occasionally, quite interestingly, my class is nearly all men.
Wow. I
They
love
want
it.
to know. Yeah.
Excuse me. Well, we have 2 minutes left, so pardon me. I always share my channeled message from my guide, my higher self, Leonini. I sit and I say, I want a message for today's podcast. And this is what she said. So here it is. When you are thirsty, you may reach for a drink of water. You take a swallow and the water quenches your thirst. Water is a most remarkable substance. Need some now. And can take many forms: liquid, steam, or solid. Yet each form can be helpful. Hold on. That's so funny that she make me cough. Excuse me. When you are spiritually thirsty, you search for what will satisfy that need because you thirst to know more. You thirst for connection and you thirst for expansion. But just like water, the answers can come in many forms, but each form has the ability to expand, rehydrate, or wake up the soul. The substance of spirit can refill your spiritual cup, and when you take a drink, you will find it refreshing. So that was her message. So
Lovely.
real quick, I have soul lessons for the card reading. So I'm gonna. Am I okay, Chris, on time? I know I'm cutting this really close. But while I'm shuffling, Michelle, I want to thank you again. Oh, I dropped my card, for agreeing to be on my show. It was fascinating.
Thank you for the invitation.
You are incredible numerologist.
I never take it for granted, Nancy. I'm very privileged that I'm allowed to do this work.
Well, they chose the right person, and I highly recommend that whoever's listening contact, because you will learn so much. You really will. And what I like is confirmation, and that's a lot what I got too. So the card that I got, I'm doing the soul lesson card, and the card says, "This is your wake up call." Right? So for everybody, this is your wake up call. You need to explore who you are, why you're here. What we didn't get to do was the life review, but maybe you can come back another time and we can do this again.
Absolutely. I'd love to. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time on the Spheres of Spirit. Take care. Bye-bye.